Guess all those things need an oil change, huh?
Hopefully not my hydro projects. Hi, I'm Seaman with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources Power Plant Research Program. Let me just tell you about our program real quick before I get into this presentation. PPRP was established in 1971 by the Power Plant Siting Research Act. We function to ensure that the state meets its electrical demands at reasonable cost while protecting the environment. We are funded through the Environmental Trust Fund. If you live in Maryland, when you pay your electric bill, you'll see a little line item on there. It's about 15 cents. I think it ranges from about 10 to 20 cents per residential customer. So that's how we get our funds to do the work we do. I'm here to talk to you today about potential hydro, but first I want to get into existing hydro. A lot of people don't realize how much hydro we have in our state. As you can see from the slide, we have 5 existing plants. These are large plants. There are actually 2 private facilities as well that aren't included in this list, but they're really small. The biggest being Conduit Dam. I'm sure you've heard of that. We're working on relicensing right now. It's been in the press a lot. That pretty much occupies most of my time. Another one is Deep Creek Lake. That's a 20 megawatt plant. A lot of people don't realize that there's hydro on that lake. We not only do they produce power through that hydro unit, they also make cold water releases for trout habitat. They also make boil water releases for recreation. There are also 2 dams on the Potomac, dams 4 and 5. They're pretty small, 1.9 and 1.2 megawatts. And then there's also one called Brighton Dam. That's on a WSSC dam out in actually just south of here. So those are the large ones. Just to put that in perspective, Maryland has about 13,500 megawatts of power on the system. About 6.5% of that is renewable, what we consider renewable. 60% of that 6.5% is hydro. So we have quite a bit of hydro in the state. I often wonder why we don't talk about it more, and I think the reason is because they're old plants. Conowingo and Deep Creek were both built in the late 20s. The Potomac dams were built in I think 1909 and 1919, so they're quite old. These are the new facilities. One is under construction or just recently constructed. John talked about that, the City of Frostburg Conduit project. The other one is the Jennings-Randolph Reservoir out in Western Maryland. That has been licensed through FERC, but it has not been constructed. They actually just asked for an extension, a 2-year extension. These projects are in the pipeline because of some new federal incentives, tax credits, and exemptions, like the Conduit Exemption. There are also 32 other dams. So back in 1999, my program, before I started with the program, we did an inventory. We do not, MEA advocates for power, we don't do that. So we didn't look at feasibility or anything like that. We just looked at what dams were in good enough shape, and we called it fair or better, that could handle hydro. So we identified 32 of them. They have about 11 megawatts of additional capacity. Conduit exemptions like the one in Frostburg is not included in that. We do plan on updating this. This is kind of old. Not much has changed though, but we do want to update this report. We're trying to find some money in our next 5-year budget to do it. So hopefully that will be updated in the next, between 2015 and 2020. So to get into the weeds a little bit, these are dams that are above 100 kilowatts. I know you guys are interested in the Western Maryland, but I included all of them. As you can see, there are a couple in Allegheny County, one in Frederick, one in Garrett, and 2 in Washington. I like pictures, so give you some perspective. You probably see these all the time. You probably don't even realize, that they're around. Drive over the bridge and see. Well, that one obviously doesn't have hydro on it. That has a capability of 1.2 megawatts, which is a pretty good size facility for a dam like that. So they're kind of around everywhere. You just have to look for them. This one's Savage River out in Garrett County. That looks a little bit different. Obviously, it doesn't have a bridge, but that's pretty typical for an earthen dam. And this one's R.P. Smith in Washington County. That actually has potential for, as you can see, 2.8 megawatts. So dams are a little bit different than most power plants in Maryland. to get licensed. Most go through the Public Service Commission. Now we also do that work, coal plants, gas-fired generators, simple cycle, combined cycle. Dams actually have to go through FERC unless they're exempted. And I'm not going to go through all these requirements, but the point here is that anything over 10 megawatts and anything on non-federal properties have to go through this licensing process. And typically the first term is 50 years. The reason for that is because there's a huge capital investment up front, so they give you a 50-year license. Once you go through relicensing, the relicensing term is usually 30 to 40. Sometimes it can be up to 50. You may have read at Conwingo, they're asking for a 46-year license. That seems to be a pretty long time for most facilities, but Conwingo's at 573 megawatts is pretty large. Once again, so under FERC, under the Federal Power Act, you have conduit exemptions like the one in Frostburg. You have the 10 megawatt exemption. You have to apply for that. Really, that's meant to kind of fast track projects that don't have much environmental concerns or issues. And then you have your traditional licenses, and there's a couple ways you can go about that. I won't get into too many details, but there's a traditional licensing process and an integrated licensing process. So like I said, the small projects under 10 megawatts, little to no change in water flow or use, those would be the run-of-river projects where you just put a hydro, whatever the river gives you, you're producing power, you're not ponding water and peaking. And then also, fish passage and threatened endangered species. So in 2013, to get into this a little bit more, FERC tried to kind of kickstart hydro generate or development, I should say. So they defined these small hydro projects as 10 megawatts or less. They also authorized an applicant to get an extension of 2 years beyond the original 3. What was happening in a lot of projects is developers were going through the licensing process, getting licensed, and then they could not get the funds to build the project. That actually happened at Jennings Randolph. So they gave them another 2 years. There's also a feasibility study, if you want to call it that, to do a 2-year license process for closed-loop pump storage facilities. I don't know if you all know what a pump storage facility is, but there's one up in just above Conwingo that actually uses the Conwingo pond. They pump water from the pond up to an upper reservoir, and then they produce power with that. They use that head to produce power when prices are right. So closed loop is where you have a reservoir lower and higher, and you're not filtering it or putting it back in the river. So FERC looks favorable upon those projects. Conduit hydropower. John, like I said, John talked about Frostburg. I won't go into that in too much detail. We like those projects. They're very low impact. Kind of makes sense. Why do we not do that? That's how I look at it. I really do. I think we should do more of them. So potential issues, ownership. Obviously, not only is it the river, which is a public resource, it's the land around it. You need land for a powerhouse. You need land for transmission lines. Financial feasibility. Unfortunately, with gas prices the way they are, I know they peak during the polar vortex, but typically they're driving prices down significantly. So hydro is becoming less and less desirable to developers, unfortunately. Environmental issues. Some of them are minor, like Jennings Randolph. Some are huge, like Conwingo. Conwingo, I'm sure you've heard about the sediment. We have fish passage issues, we have flow issues, we have habitat issues, we have endangered species, we have pond elevations, we have peaking. I mean, we did 32 studies that cost about $30 million just to investigate that project for the next license term. So, I guess I got into that a little premature, but changes in water quality, changes in water quantity, meaning flow, and effects on fish populations and blockages. Like I said, those are some of the major impacts of dams. So that concludes my presentation. Here are some additional resources. You have any questions?
I couldn't help but notice that you had a potential hydroelectric facility in Frederick County. And I'm wondering, have you communicated with any of the local elected officials on that hydropower potential? Is that something that's been under discussion in the past?
No, well, like I said, we do not advocate for power. That's MEA, Maryland Energy Administration. They would do that work. We were specifically set up to be objective and technical. We advise the state on technical basis for power projects, so that's something that we did. That's why we just did an inventory of the dams.
Do you have a way for me to get a copy of that study? Because I'd love to talk to our officials and see how aware of it they are of it.
Yes, if it's not on our website, if you just type Google PPRP, you'll see a section that has a bibliography. If you can't find it in there, you can always contact me and I can get you a hard copy.
Okay. And do you know who I might talk to at MEA that might have had some communication with the county? I'm really interested to learn more about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would start with Abby Hopper, but she runs the agency, so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
You can text her.
I know, I heard. That's her best way of communicating. Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Any other questions?